looking at processes today, and I have the honourable duty of introducing you to the concept of quality. Now, primarily my job is to talk to you about quality about projects, but I'm going to range a bit further and wider than simply that, because I think that quality really affects almost everything that you do, every aspect of your life. And if we can pick up something about what makes life a quality thing, then maybe the project itself will become a quality thing as well. So I'm going to try and put a bit of that in, but I'm also primarily going to give you a whole pile of tools today. Different mechanisms for you to check, monitor quality, control quality within your team and for your projects. That's my main aim today, for you to leave here thinking, oh right, I've got about 6, 7, 8 different tools that I can use now, which I can then apply to my project. And along the way, I hope that you'll also find that there is something in it too for you personally, which may enable you to live maybe a slightly more, well, quality life of some kind. So, what we're about is the pursuit of excellence. And I don't normally recommend books which are outside the curriculum, but this one is definitely outside the curriculum. You may not have heard of it, and you may think, what a strange book to recommend. It's a book which I've read probably 3 times through different decades of my life, and I still find it a valuable and interesting book to read. I go back to it every now and again. And it's got a really surprising title because it's called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And I can just see you saying, well, just stop right there. Hold on. You know, Zen, oh, I'm telling you, I'm not interested in Zen, so leave that to one side. And you know what, I'm not interested in motorcycles, and certainly not maintenance of motorcycles, so I'll leave that to one side too, so it's not a book for me, thank you. Just hear you saying that, but I have to say, this book, despite its title, there's nothing to do really about Zen at all, and it's nothing to do about motorcycle maintenance. So it does mention it briefly in passing, but it's not about that either. It's a strangely titled book, and despite its weird title, it's probably sold more copies than you could ever possibly expect. I think it's over 20 million or more copies now throughout the world, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And if it's not about Zen, and if it's not about motorcycle maintenance, then what is it about? Well, the author, Robert Pirsig, this is the first book he wrote, I think that he only wrote on a couple of hours, so this is a big one. He said, I would like, it's about quality, okay? And these are his words, I would like to be concerned, within this book, to be concerned with the question of what is best. And in other words, what is the best way to act? What is the best way to think? What is the best way to live? And by extension, what is the best way to do your project? Okay, because all this interleaves in a kind of strange way that life does, doesn't it? Because it connects everything together. So, it's an important question, he said. It's probably the second most oldest question known to man. I will leave you to ponder what the first most important or oldest question to man is. If you want to know, I'll ask you and tell you later. But it is probably the second oldest known question, and it's one which goes right the way back to how do we live, how do we act, and how do we act to produce a good project. So I recommend this book to you. It picks up the idea of quality as its main theme, and it talks about how you live a life that's, I suppose, worth living. How you do a project that's worth doing. All right? We talk about projects, and it's a good read. It's a story really about a guy journeying across America on a motorbike. He's going from one coast to the other coast with his son, and in between time he gives little talks, which he called chapters, got that right. Little talks about, well, you know, fan of Douglas Adams, life, the universe, and everything comes into it. But preeminently, it's about quality. And I recommend it to you, because you see many quality things in life. Anyone ever seen a really, really good stage performer? Anyone ever seen this guy? Michael McIntyre. If you've ever seen him on stage, it's quite phenomenal. The guy comes on, doesn't have any notes. He's in front of an audience of many, many, many thousands of people, and he just talks. And as he talks, he holds everyone in the palm of his hand. He can do a fantastic job at amusing people, making them laugh, fall over in their chairs. He can control the whole audience, and he doesn't need to look at anything for 2 hours. He just stands up and he walks around and he talks. That's all he does. You have to say, it's a quality act. You know, he really is the top of his tree. He's very, very good at what he does, and being able to communicate in that way is just amazing. Amazing. He does it brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. You can see he's got the pose as well for it. But the question I want to ask you is this: how do you think he gets to that stage? How do you think anybody gets to the top of the tree? How do you think anybody gets to the point of being excellent? How does anyone get to the point of producing something of real quality that others want to see and take note of? Well, I'll tell you something. What you're seeing there is just the tiniest, tiniest tip of the iceberg, because below the surface there is hours and hours and days and weeks and weeks and probably months and months and even years of work that goes on behind the scenes. You cannot produce quality without a huge amount of dedication to what you're doing. You know, if you want to be the very best in your field, say the very best computing software person, or the very best entrepreneur, or the very best at whatever you choose to do, you've got to sacrifice a huge amount to do that, because it's going to take you 18 hours a day, and you do nothing else except do that job, and you dedicate yourself to it, and then you become the very best that there is. Many people are not prepared to do that because they want a balanced life, and they want a family life, and they want a social life, and they want all kinds of things. And that's fair enough. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But I'm saying if you want to get to that very point where there's no one better than you, then there are people like that. They're outliers. They're very unusual people. They get to the very top of what they do, but they only do it by extraordinarily hard work, attention to detail. And this guy here, he will have spent weeks and weeks and weeks honing his performance. You see none of all of that. You just see him walk on the stage and entertain you for an hour and a half. But behind it all, there's a massive, massive amount of work that you don't see. And if you're prepared to put that kind of work in, you too can be excellent. You can strive and aim for excellence. So we're going to look at this question then. So the first question I want to ask today is, what is quality? You know, we all recognise quality when we see it. You can see a car and you say, wow, yeah, that Ferrari over there, that's a quality thing. That Porsche is fantastic. That watch which you've got there, that's a quality item. Not just because of the money that it might cost you, but because it just looks like it's quality. When you see, you make judgments all the time about quality accommodation. Is it good enough for you to stay in? Quality food that you're going to be eating. Has it got quality ingredients? You have to make all these decisions all the time. And you do it almost instinctively. But the question is, what is this quality that you're looking at here? It's not just price. And I know there's a kind of correlation between how much something costs and the quality of it. And it's not always there. Sometimes some of these brands are just sort of ripping you off because there's not much quality with a lot of price. But anyway, how do you know what quality is and how do you define it? Well, that's a problem which racked the brains of Robert Pirsig. I'll tell you what he thought of it in a moment or two. But before that, I'm going to tell you that there have been lots of different definitions of quality. What is it that makes quality? How do you pin it down? What actually is it in practice? Well, Harvey and Knight have listed the various different definitions that people have used for quality. Some people say quality is what is exceptional. I kind of go for that one, because it's something which stands out as being, you know, the best, the highest quality. If you want to go and get your food, you might get your food from Asda, or you might get your food from Waitrose, but you expect, if you're going to go and get it from Waitrose, that you're going to get a better quality product, don't you? But what does it mean? You know, quality is the exceptional. You might see some amazing things. If you go down to London and Harrods, you'll see on their food store, fantastic layout, fish display is just out of this world. You know, you expect the quality to be superb. Former Masons will provide you an even better quality, maybe. It is the exceptional thing. The caviar, the truffles, the things which stand out, which are really, really big. That could be a definition of quality. And some people use that definition, but there's another one. Quality as consistency. And if you've got a production line that's producing widgets off the production line, what do you want for that? You want consistency. You don't want, you know, 10 widgets out of 100 failing to meet the needs or whatever. You want consistency of product. So a different person might have a different definition of quality. Here's another one for you. Quality as fitness for purpose. Does it do what it's required to do? You go and gather requirements from a customer. Does it meet their requirements? And if it does, then some people say, you've got a quality product. There's a problem with that, because sometimes people like to exceed requirements and do even better than that. And then people think, wow, you're a really brilliant, superb software engineer because you've given me even more than I wanted, and that's real quality. But that's a common definition, is fitness for purpose. So other people define quality as value for money. I've got a quality product, and for that, I've got real good value for money. This jacket, for example, picked this up in London in a charity shop this weekend. It cost me, well, not so much, but it's a very nice quality jacket with real leather pictures, all that kind of thing. I would call that quality, but it was incredibly cheap. It's only about 30 quid, whereas normally it would cost about 500. So you might call that quality because it's value for money. Brilliant. Okay. But there are other definitions as well. Quality as transformative, which means it takes you from one state to another. You might say you have a quality interaction. Maybe you read the book like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and that transforms you in some way. Transforms many people, which is why it becomes such a big seller. And you might say that is a quality product. Classic books are defined as being classics, not only because they stood the test of time, but because they transform people's outlooks and views and minds, so you widen out your perspective. So, and lastly, the last definition of quality, which is a good business kind of definition, meets requirements. It's a bit like fitness for purpose. Fitness for purpose does the job, but meeting requirements is what maybe the customer wants or the client wants, or whatever it may be. I suppose one of the most common ones is that one, quality that meets requirements, but we need a definition of quality which is going to work for us for your project. And we can't use Robert Pirsig's definition, because that's more about quality of life, and instead you've got to have something which is going to apply directly to your project. So, meeting requirements, well, it's not always going to be easy to define that, because you don't know what the requirements might be. Whose requirements are we talking about? We're talking about the client's requirements, we're talking about the customer's requirements, we're talking about the end user's requirements, what the client has, we're talking about technical staff's requirement for system installation. All of these are different definitions of quality, and meeting requirements is not easy to pin down. one which is probably the most common and the most useful, and the one which is a reasonably good fit, and it will be useful for our purposes here, is for your project to be fit for purpose. That's the standard business definition of quality. Fit for purpose, in other words, you've got a peg which is nice and round, you've got a hole which is nice and round, and the peg fits in perfectly. It's fit for purpose. You'd say that was a quality peg. If your hole was square, it wouldn't be a quality peg. So it has to fit the purpose. So the object that you create, or the thing that you do, is something which fits in with something else. So we're going to use that definition. Fit for purpose in everyday language means well equipped for its suited purpose. It has a legal definition. From 1979, there was an act of law, the Sale of Goods Act, which said that any goods that you buy must be, quote, fit for purpose, by which they mean quality goods. If it's not fit for purpose, you have action in law, you can take it back, and you can demand repayment. And fit for purpose in a business term is something which does the job for which it is intended. Okay, so we're going to go with that. Fit for purpose is a definition is just about fit for purpose itself. But I think if you're going to look at a wider scope, you may want a bigger definition of quality for your own life. I think if you're satisfied with fit for purpose, you won't be reaching very far. You'll be quite satisfied with something quite limited. And maybe the quality of the goods that people have are quite limited for that reason. So that's going to be our definition of quality. Not suitable for you and I, not suitable for giving you any meaningful life as such, but suitable for getting your project done. All right? So let's now see how to answer this question. How do we, now we know what it is, fitness for purpose, as far as the project is concerned, how do we maintain it? How do we get hold of it? How do we engineer it into our project itself? How do we do that? Well, there are three things which will help you to do this perfectly. And these are the three things that you need if you're going to have quality in your project. Yes, what are they? Here they are. Standards, monitoring, and control. Repeat that. Standards, monitoring, and control. Because those three, if you've got those three together, then you are going to have the ability to make something that's quality. So, let me explain how that works a little bit more. So, every control process, every quality control process has these three elements to it. It has, step one, you have to set the standards. If you haven't got any standards, well, you're not going to have any quality. Step two, you have to then compare the performance of what you're doing, or what you have, or what your artifact is, whatever it is you're looking at. Compare that with the standards which you've got. All right? And then, thirdly, you need to take any corrective action if you see a difference between the two. Now you might say to me, Philip, that's rather obvious. It is incredibly obvious. It's basic stuff, but it's amazing how easily we forget that kind of thing. If you implement those three things, 1, 2, 3, set your standards, monitor your performance against those standards, and then make any changes that you need to get it back online. If you were to just do those three things, you would ensure that you engineer quality into whatever you're doing. All right. Well, notice, the very first thing is, here's a picture of a thermostat, sort of fancy thermostat. I've actually got one of these at home. And it works exactly on the same principle. You can dial up exactly what temperature you require your room to be at. Normally I set mine at 21.5, feel cold a little bit. 21.5 is where I dial it up to. And then, when you're going about business and the temperature of the room is falling up and down, it tells you, actually the temperature of this room is 19. Shows you on the diagram, 19, it's a little less. And so automatically it compares the present temperature with what it should be, the standard. And then it automatically switches on the boiler. And the central heating comes on until that dial goes right up to 21.5, and then it switches off again. So, and then it maintains it constantly like that. So that's exactly what your thermostat is doing. It's a quality control device, temperature being the item under control. So you set a standard, you monitor what the difference is between the present and the standard, and then you take some action to improve. So if you've got those three things, and say, you might say that's really basic, really obvious, but look how you apply it, because application becomes important here. Let me show you. Let's take a particular case. Let's take it that you want to manage your team. Okay, everyone's got a job to do there. Okay, that's probably your biggest job, because managing people is probably the hardest thing you'll do. Managing your software is easy compared to managing people, all right? But you've got to manage your team. So what's the first step that you've got to take? This is the step which is probably most important, and the one which people forget all the time and leave out. You've got to set your standards. If you don't have a set of standards, you cannot have any quality, right? That applies in personal life too. If you have no standards, you have no quality of life. That's my personal observation, so you can take that or leave it as you like. But that's just my personal experience over how long I've been around. But if you don't have any standards for your team, you won't have a quality product for your team either. Okay? So, let's have a look. Take your team, how do you manage it? It's a bunch of ragged people who are doing their best to try to not do much work. If it's an average team, that is. If you're a good team, they're all powering away and doing fantastic stuff. But here, the first thing you've got to do is set your standards. I've just given you 3 examples here. I mean, there could be many other standards that you might want to use, but I'll just give you 3. You might say, well, our standard in this team is we've all got to turn up on time. Punctuality is one of our standards. You've got to name it. You've got to actually label it like you turn the dial up on your thermostat. Standard includes team attendance, punctuality. Okay? And then the quality of work has to be of a certain standard each week, which you do. We have a look at it, see what it is. And then you've got to meet your deadline, so that if you've got to bring that work in on a certain date, that's what you do. You do it at that time. And the standards you set are done by putting values to them. So you say, well, how much punctuality or team attendance do we actually need? Let's going to make that 100%. Be here for everything. Unless you've broken a leg, be here. 100% attendance is what we require. Okay? Fair enough. You can set it at 90 if you want, or you can set it at 50 if you want. It doesn't matter as far as I'm concerned, because you've just got to set your standard. That's the point. You create your own standard and then you have to live up to it. Same with life again. And then the quality of work completed. You say, well, the work we want has to be of distinction level. We want it to get 70 plus marks. So does the work that you brought in look like it's going to be at that level? Okay? That's your standard. Well, it might be, we just want to pass. Okay? If we just want to pass, it's got to be 40%, and that's fine. If it gets into that, we're okay with it. But set your own standard. You can do that. That's fine. As long as you've got the standard. The worst case is not having a standard at all. And then the third one, meeting deadlines. Okay? If we set something to be done this week, it's got to be done this week. Is there any leeway on that? No. Or if you've got 100% on your standard for that. It might be 90%. 90% is what comes in, meets the deadline. Up to you. Say, set your own standards. Know where you're aiming. Know what your goals are, and write them down so everybody knows and buys into them. That's your first step in managing your team. Okay? Right. What's the next step? Monitoring. Right. So we need to monitor the actual performance of your team against the standards which you have yourselves created. How do you do that? Well, you've got weekly meetings. So you may have a weekly meeting, which you can then use them to monitor everything. So you set up your weekly meetings, you set up individual weekly tasks, and there's deadlines attached to those, and then you check the work. And during your monitoring process, you're checking for this. Is there 100% attendance? Well, there is for most people, but maybe this guy over here is not attending. What do? We'll talk about that under control. Then there's individual weekly tasks, 100% deadlines, that's what we said. Monitor it against that every week. Is that what's happening? And finally, you're going to check that the work meets the 70% standard. Now that's the monitoring process. Is it up to that? No, I think this work is only worth 60. All right? What are we going to do? So now we have to move on to stage 3 and implement your control system. Yeah, there's a control system. It's like the gear lead in my car. Here we are. Suddenly you find there was poor attendance from some people. So how do you control that? Well, you can control that because there are various tools and techniques you can use. You can send reminders, obviously. You can send texts, you can send emails. Might do some good, might not do some good. You can apply peer pressure. You can get everyone to send a text and an email. You can get everyone to badger them in some way. If nothing seems to work at all, the backstop is, you've got me. Come and talk to me about it, or send them an email copy to me. I'll reply, I'll get them involved if I can, and if I can't get them involved and pulling their weight, I'll split them off your team and they can do their own work on them by themselves. Okay, that's a big enough threat. Tasks not delivered on time, what do you do with that? Closer monitoring, like on a daily or every other day basis. Pair up people with a buddy system so that you have people working together in teams and making sure that they're doing something like that. And you can have pulse meetings. What are pulse meetings? Pulse meetings are very quick 10-minute meetings or a 5-minute meeting with the program leader to say, tell me, is it still alive? Or take a pulse, Is it still going where you're up to, where we're up to today? I'll see you tomorrow. Send me a 10-minute meeting. So there are ways of managing these things. This is the control mechanism. And if you get quality, which is not up to standard, it's only 50% value in your opinion, what do? You return it. It's not good enough. We need it redone. And you can be quite strict with that. If you're not strict with that, then people will take advantage of you. They'll put in low quality work and try and push boundaries. It's like dealing with teenagers in some ways. They'll push boundaries until they find there's no further way they can push to it. They can do whatever they like. Unless you set up boundaries, which is your control mechanism. Okay, so return the work if it's not good enough. Does that all make sense? Good. So, quality. We're going to pick up the idea of quality and apply it first and primarily to your project. And I'm going to give you a whole range of tools by which you can monitor and control the quality of your project. Okay, that's both the process and the outcome. First of all, I'm going to tell you the number of things that you need to monitor. All right, one of them I've already touched on. I'll go into a little bit more detail. But the 4 things that you need to monitor most of all, well, one of them doesn't count really, but the 4 things I've got are your team activities, your schedule. The one that doesn't count is the budget, but you do have to do some budgetary accounting, so it's kind of interesting for you. And it's something you'll come across in real life because you'll get these kinds of sheets which explain things about how to monitor budgets. Ooh. And then risks, which of course you know how to do that as well. But we're going to manage to do that too. All right. There are 4 other things which I am not going to go into. But in a real project where people were living in the real world outside these amazing walls here, where you're a project manager, you probably have to look at communications, scope. Scope doesn't increase or decrease. that the artifact, that the actual widget that you're making is up to scratch, and procurement, which means the staffing that come and go, how you're going to manage all of that. So, but you're not going to look at those today. We're looking at the top 4, just as 4 things for you to keep track of. So we look at team activities, is the team working? Schedule, job starts, job finishes, those kind of things. Budget, just in passing because you need to know about it for other things. And risk. So let me show you these 4 things then. Where are we? Monitoring the team activities. I've already given you an indication of how to do this. I really don't need to explain it again, but you know what, I'm going to. You know why? Because this is the most difficult task you've got. This is a task that people come to me and say, Philip, we've got someone in our team who's not pulling their weight, or we've got half of our team doesn't turn up, or the other half, they're just too demanding. They're like taskmasters, and they're cracking the whip all the time, and we can't get things done right, you know, to their satisfaction. What are we going to do? So the most important thing is to check your team members, so the monitoring process. How do you do that? Well, I've already indicated to you that you have to record what you do. First of all, know your standards, the standards of your team. What are you aiming at? What's the goal that you're aiming towards? Is it quite a low down one? Is it a very high up one? Is everyone tied into that? Make sure everyone knows what you're doing. Write them down. Get them articulated in some way. If your goals are not articulated, if your standards are not articulated, then you don't have any standards. It's as simple as that. All right? And that goes true for life as well. If you don't know what your standards are, what you believe is right and wrong, if you don't know what's good or bad, then you don't have any standards in life either, and that will affect the quality of your life too. But that's just my comment in passing. I've said that you need to keep, this was last year, but it'll do for this year, 9th of March, you have a team meeting. Keep a record of your team meeting. It's very important that you document some things. Not in great detail, I'm not asking you to write reams and reams, just some bullet points. You know, Tom is going to create a cash flow chart for 5 years, over a 5-year period, by the 16th of March. Dick is going to analyse the GDPR and produce a definitive list of requirements by the 16th of March. And Harriet is going to create a marketing plan with 3 types of advertising, etc. You write it down, you document it, you store it away. Very good evidence if you need to throw anyone out of the team, because then you've got a follow-up here. So, keep a longer record, a checklist of your team activities. Whoever is your project manager should have something like this tool in their arsenal here. You know, activities all listed by activity, all named, and then the responsibilities are down there, and whether they're done, whether they're partially done, whether they're complete, a bit like a kind of Kanban board, but you've got it all in one place and you know where things are. If you have something like that, you'll be in charge of your project. You'll know where things are and how things are going. Get the long list of activities down very clearly. You should have that from your work breakdown structure. Other teams, other ways of monitoring your activities other than your annual meeting, your weekly meeting in your sheet. Buddy checks, you can pair team members up. That may be necessary in some cases. Doesn't always do it for bad reasons, but you know, you can get, people can oversee each other's work. Work circulation, send the work around to everybody so we can all see it. That's accountability for you. If everyone's going to see what you've done, no, don't put up with the idea that, yeah, I've done it, but I haven't got it. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I haven't got it at the moment. I'll get it next week. No. Circulate it. Everyone gets to see it. After all, everyone's going to get a mark for it. Everyone's got a right to see it. Their mark is tied up with what you've done. Pulse meetings, I mentioned those already. One-to-one meeting with the project manager, 10 minutes only, check the status of what you've done. Maybe we are, maybe on a daily basis. Monitor your team. Number 2, monitor your standards. Schedule. Monitor your schedule. We've already said how we do that, and you already know about monitoring schedules because we've got a schedule monitoring tool already, haven't we? It's called a Gantt chart. So you can see the Gantt chart. It tells you exactly what should be done. There we all this down there. At which point, week 37, we're doing revision. Week 30, 40, we're doing tests, build 2, and marketing. Okay, that's obvious. But did you know that you can monitor your Gantt chart? Ooh, how do you do that? Well, these are the kind of Gantt chart that we've had. We've marked out the critical pathway. This is very simplified one. I expect yours to be more complicated than this, by the way. This is not, you know, the standard. It's just illustrative. So, we've got our set of tasks to do, day 1 to 14. This is how it is looking. But how does it work out in practice? Well, how it works out in practice might be different to how it's actually planned out. So, if that's your Gantt chart, the red thing, then you say, well, how long did that first task actually take? Oh, wait a minute. It took that longer to do. All right, how much did the next task take? Well, that couldn't start until the first blue one had finished, so that's been pushed on as well there. So we're pushing on things on the critical pathway, and you can see that the reality is a bit different from the plan. And these other ones, they took longer too. Now, all of that is called a tracking Gantt chart, where you put your original plan in, and underneath it, the reality. Now you can compare the two. And now you can say, well, task A there took an extra day, longer than it should have done. Ah, can we put that on a chart of some kind? Yes, we can. Look, you've got the reporting period. The dotted line along the dotted line there is, you follow that dotted line if you do everything on schedule. Okay? If you go above the dotted line, you're taking longer than the schedule said you should take. And if you go below the dotted line, you're doing faster than the schedule said. So you can have one of these charts. It's called an activity control chart. And you can monitor how your activities are doing and whether you're following the dotted line or not. So you can see from the you can see from this that the activities are not doing too well in actual fact, because you're going to take longer than the 15 days you planned. And so that's going to go above the actual chart. Often it doesn't really matter if it goes above, as long as it comes down and up and down, and as long as by the time you get to the end, you're either on the line or below the line. That's your control system. You make sure that, oh, look, we're going over time. We better do something, put more people on this job and bring it down. So that's how you monitor your schedule. There's another monitoring tool, of course, which I think I've mentioned before, which is milestones. These are key points on your precedent network diagram. These key points here you allocate. The first one, M1, milestone number 1 is always the one that it starts with. And M4 is always the last one, because the last one by definition is always a milestone. And then you pick out key areas here. M2 is a milestone because until you've done or reached milestone M2, then you can't start 3 particular tasks. 3 particular tasks are key and they're waiting for milestone 2 to be done. And similarly, milestone 3 is reasonably significant. You could have had further on, but 2 things have to come in before something else can start. So identify milestones and then check your milestones in your meetings. Have we reached the milestones on time? Cool. I've just lost my entire thing. I'll have to resurrect it. Don't know what happened there. Everything closed. Maybe I've got a virus. Who knows? This is the bit I told you that's not quite as relevant as the other items are, because you're not doing a real budget. Well, you're doing a kind of cash flow. So this may help you to understand how the cash flow works, but I won't spend much time on this. Just want you to notice that this is a typical budget, planned versus actual. I've been in many meetings where they have these kind of budgets. And what you do is you have a list of all the things you want to spend money on, and then you have the annual budget. So for publicity, I've got £1,200 to spend for the whole year on publicity. And then the next column here, the budget to date, is actually we're halfway through the year now. And because we're halfway through the year, we should have £600 left in the budget. We should have spent 600 and we should have £600 left. So to date is what the proportion is, or it should be so far. And then the next one is the actual to date. In actual fact, we've only got £540 in the budget because we overspent so much a little bit earlier on, more than we should have done, but we'll have to smooth that out. And then the variance is just what the difference is between the planned, the 600, and the actual 540. So that's £60. So we're £60 over, all right? And then we've got anything in brackets, by the way, is kind of under. And then the variance in percentage-wise, well, that's 10% of what it should have been. 60 is 10% of 600. And the utilisation is the same factor, but taken over the 540, taken over the 1,200. So we've utilised 45% of our budget in total. And that's how budgets are tracked. Every month, people come with a new budget and they update you to show that you're on track, or if you're not. It's a tracking budget, and that's how you track things in terms of money. And finally, on these items on monitoring, what you monitor is the risks. We've already looked at this. Just wanted to remind you, just very briefly, that at the end of your risk plan, you have a status column. And in the status column, you revisit that every team meeting, go through the risks and say, has that occurred? Has this now been crossed off? Is this finished? Is this done with? Or has this got any bigger? Do we change it? And then you update it so you've got a status. It's important to monitor your risk schedule. It's very easy to create a very nice risk schedule and just shelve it away somewhere and forget about it. But a wise team, and a team which wants marks, will take the risk schedule and will every week sit down and look at it and add some things to the final column to say whether it's updated or finished. And just a little hint or a tip, you'll get a good set of marks if you do your risk management schedule a bit like that. But if it's got no status, you won't get the fullest possible marks. If you've got your status column filled in, wow, you can possibly get the full marks for the entire set on risk management. So, just a small hint on that. Show that you are managing it. And learning from experience, well, we all do that. So, summary, monitoring. That's the summary of what we said we were going to do here. Summary. 4 things I want you to particularly monitor, not counting the budget. Monitor everyone's activities using your minutes and outlook form. Monitor your Gantt chart by doing a tracking Gantt chart and maybe milestones as well, and maybe even one of those variance kind of charts as well. Monitor the milestone. I want to mention that one. Make a different person responsible for each milestone in your team so that they're checking that we're on score for that. That's a good idea to do that. And then finally, monitor your risks by appointing a risk manager to bring that risk element to your table, to your meeting each week. That's their responsibility. Okay, what have we got on the risks? Well, I don't need to mention all these again. There's only one of them which really needs updating. There's this one. All right, good. Give someone the responsibility. Make the team work and do it properly. So there are the 4 things which I want you to monitor for your project. Now, what tools am I going to give you to do that? Because I did promise you some tools. Well, I've given you some tools, but there are some more interesting ones here. Tools, 6 tools for monitoring. In fact, there may even be 7. This is called a run chart of whatever. This is to do with the object that you're making. Now, it's very easy to understand, in fact, if you're making widgets. If you're making widgets that come off the line here, and you're making, 1,000 widgets a day, and they just fall off the line, how do you know that they're all as good as each other? Well, one way of doing that is to take your widget and then measure it with, in some way. Maybe the weight of the widget is a good idea as to whether it's a quality object or not. So in this case, I'm measuring the weight of my widgets, and I take a sample of them as they come off the line, and I can see that I've got 30 observations of widgets which I picked up. I do it maybe every day, and this tells me the weight of them. You can see that they're all around the sort of central mark, which is where they should be, but you can also see how far off some of them are. And if they go too far off, you'll know, something needs to be checked on the machinery that's producing the widgets. So that's called a run chart. And it's a run chart because as the process is running, now it may not apply to you directly, but it's an idea of how these things work. There's also something called a control chart, which is very similar to a run chart. And here is, again, you're measuring some kind of element that you're looking at in terms of your project is producing. And you're measuring it on a fairly reasonable basis, maybe a daily basis. And then you've got your control chart where you've got top lines, upper limit, and a lower limit. So that's what's called a control chart. And everything is under control if it's within those 2 lines. But if it's above the line, the red line, or below the grey line, if it ever falls into those categories outside, then you're out of control and something really serious needs to take place. So this is about tolerances. Center line, and it may well be that there are some parameters which you're producing on a daily basis that you need to check. Don't know what that could be. It could be, for example, the amount of work that gets turned in. It could be your Gantt chart. It could be the way in which you're, on a daily basis, are we still within, above, or below the line? So that's a second tool you can use, using a control chart. And Excel can produce these things for you. It's got a choice for it. Anyone heard of Mr. Pareto? Frederick Pareto. He's a very important guy in statistics. He lived about the 19th century. He came up with Pareto's law, which is really quite an observational law. He noticed, for example, that he said that 20% of the people own 80% of the property, roughly speaking. And that's a kind of a rule which you say, well, that's interesting, but why should that be of any great interest to me, that 20% of the people own 80% of the property? It seems quite sensible that that's what would happen. It's an uneven distribution. Even Karl Marx couldn't bring it down from the distribution that it is here. So this is a distribution, the Pareto principle, which applies to all kinds of things. It doesn't just apply to wealth, for example. It applies to many things, like 80% of the work can be done in 20% of the time. I don't know if you've come across that 80-20 rule. And you might say, how does that work? Well, that's because it's non-linear. You can get on and produce a database and get 80% of it done quite quickly. But it's that extra, making things work, getting over the problems, making it smooth, getting the interface ready, all that little extra stuff, which takes even more time. You can use the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, to your advantage if you can apply that in some way. 80% of the best-selling music only comes from 20% of the bands, for example. That's another example of how it works out. There's a lot of other similar things. 80% of the losses that a company makes comes from 20% of the causes that are there. And if you break down your elements into categories, you can see that this is like the support cases that come to an IT department. And what do I need to spend my time on? Well, look, 41% of the cases are interested, one needs support for setup, and then another 19% needed for software failure, need support for that. Another 15% require support for delivery, and then there's configuration and hardware failure and connection issues and other things like that. But you can begin to see that if you stack them all up in that kind of way, if you can deal with the first three, because you've got limited resources, you can't cover everything so well. What should you cover? Cover the first three. If you cover setup, software failure and delivery, then you're covering 80% with only 20% of the staff that you need. Get the idea? You can prioritize using the Pareto principle. So we have, as I say, good old Vilfredo Pareto to thank for that. And you'll find that Pareto principle rears its head in all different kinds of areas in life, as I'm sure you'll find. Here's another tool for you. And by the way, when you talk of these tools, I'm asking you to use them within your project. In your project, when you come to do your final upload, you may have an Ishikawa diagram, a cause and effect diagram, because you might want to track something down and show how that works. Supposing this is the standard cause and effect diagram, the way in which these are useful in almost anything. If you've missed a deadline, for example, an important deadline with a client, what caused it? What caused it? It could be multiple causes. It could not just be one thing necessarily. And what this diagram does, it allows you to put together people, methods, measurements, machines, environment, and materials, which are the standard 6 elements on them. And then you can look through and list the things in here as to what's caused the problem. If it was a machine issue, a coffee machine was broken, or the car wouldn't start, or there was a poor internet connection, or a slow computer, something fell over, that goes into your causal diagram. On the other hand, it could be people. You had a micromanaging boss, or an absent secretary, or there were sick children, and all that kind of thing. And with this diagram, you can track down all the causes which might have led to the effect that you want to avoid. Once you track down the causes, then hopefully you can put something in place which will remedy that and stop it from happening again. You know. So make use of the cause and effect diagram as and when you feel it necessary. If you can make use of these things, you'll get marks for them in your upload. There's another one here. It's called the causal loop diagram. Again, it's about tracking down problems. This is one about why a project fails or why a project succeeds. I'm talking about a student project. And it can be for a number of reasons. You see, these things, there's student fatigue, which affects the work done. And if you do a lot of work, you might produce fatigue. And then if there's fatigue, that might impact the student's motivation to work hard, because they're too tired to work hard. And you've got another one for morale. You've got professors' fatigue, professors' morale. You've got students' enthusiasm, how that affects the motivation. All the different things that affect other things. You can track them. And if you do something like this, you can start to pin down, this is where the problem area is, which is what's causing us the difficulty. It takes some work to try to produce something like that, but that's something which you might want to think about doing. There are causal loop diagrams. That's just one of many. And the last one I wanted to point you to with something called the Current Reality Tree, something called the CRT. It's another tool for tracking down causes and effects. What you need to do is to list all the undesirable things that are happening in your project and look for a cause and effect. The way you do it is you start off, there's a diagram on the right, and you start off at the top. So this is an undesirable effect. The end users are unhappy with our service. Now you need to sit and think, why? What's the reasoning for that? And you can think of two things. The incidents took a long time to resolve, and there were lots of repeat incidents. It keeps coming back and back, and they don't get sorted out. So you put those two things, which are leading into the reality tree. And then you think, well, why did the incidents take a long time to resolve? And then you start to think the reasons for that. Many incidents are poorly managed. That's why they took a long time to resolve. So that leads into that. But that also impacts the lots of repeat incidents. Also, we don't identify problems very well. So that's something else which leads into the lots of repeat incidents. That's why they keep coming back again. And then you might say, well, what's caused so many incidents to be poorly managed? High turnover of staff, you can put that in, and the service desk agents don't know how to manage the incidents, which leads to a high turnover, which leads to poor management. And so you've tracked back all the problems. And now, once you've actually articulated them, you can look at those individual boxes and think, how do I solve this particular one? Or hand that to a management, some other issue. But tracking it is the first stage. And you can use a current reality tree for that. Look these things up if you want further details of them. I'm just giving you a skim over the surface of half a dozen different tools to use. All right. Let's move on, because you're wanting something a little bit more practical. And in particular, I've had people come to me and say, we've done pretty well everything that we need to do for our project planning thing, except the project monitoring, quality monitoring plan. What on earth do you want for that? Pay attention, and I will tell you exactly what to do for the quality monitoring plan, and how you can apply this elsewhere. So, for a quality monitoring plan, you need to list a number of items, 4 items here. List all the processes that you plan to monitor. Some of them are monitored, some of them are not. Just list the ones that you plan to monitor. And then, number 2, for each of those processes, list the outputs of the processes. What does that mean? I'll show you in a moment. And then, how the quality of the product will be monitored, or how it will be tested, what tools you might use for doing that, and the version control, and then the allocation of responsibilities, who's going to do that bit. 4 things you need. All right? How do you arrange that? Well, arrange them in a table. Table's always very good. So here we've got the project process on the left-hand side, the outputs and the deliverables, the quality monitoring activities you're going to do, and who's going to do it. This is your quality monitoring process. The project process I've listed are the planning, the requirements, the design, the coding and testing, the user documentation, and the system testing. Let's say these are the processes I want to monitor. Right, how do I do that? Well, I've got to fill in these other boxes. First of all, what are the outputs for the project planning? What's the outputs for the requirements? What's the outputs for the software design? And you start to fill it in. And this is an example of what it might look like. So, for the project planning, what the outputs and deliverables are is a schedule, your Gantt chart. That's one of the things which is an output. The budget may be another output of planning, the monitoring scheme may be another output, and the risk and contingency plan may be another output of the scheduling. So they are outputs which you can then look at and use. For the requirements, well, the output for that is a specification of some kind. And also maybe a system test plan of some kind. And for the software design, well, you'll need system design documents, user design documents, unit test cases. All right. So these are the outputs of those particular processes that you're going to go through. Okay, now what are you going to do? Well, let's just take the top one. I'm not going to go through the whole table, but let's have a look at the top one. The schedule can be reviewed for feasibility, to bring to light unforeseen staffing and other constraints. In all those tools that we've used, how is the schedule doing using your tracking Gantt chart and your other charts? And the person who might be responsible for that is the program manager, and in fact the whole development team as a whole. And the budget, well, that might be reviewing the budget on one of those tables there. The monitoring scheme, review the team to help plan that, and so on. The risk and contingency plan, we're going to monitor the risk in these different ways. And if you can produce a chart like this, table like this, then that will carry your quality monitoring plan. It shows that you know what the processes are which are critical. It shows that you know what the outputs of those things are that you're going to look at. It shows how you're going to look at those particular things and monitor them. And it shows who is responsible for them. It's really quite simple and straightforward. And if you produce a quality monitoring plan that looks like that, you'll do fantastically well. So, really quite straightforward. And that's what I'm requiring of you for quality monitoring plan. You do have to upload by, well, it was going to be the 13th of March, your project plan. And someone came to me and said, look, you know, we haven't actually had any information about quality monitoring and other things like that, so the 13th is going to come and go and we haven't learned everything about it. Fair enough, I said. Quite right too. You need a bit more time. So I think I've moved that on now to the 24th? 24th, okay, which is next Friday, not this Friday, the following Friday. Okay. And you will have to upload your project plan, which is a multi-page document. Some people say to me, are we limited to the number of pages that it says? And the answer to that is no. They're just indicative. They're just, you know, what might be about average. If your standards are going above average, then they might be bigger than that. There might be more detail in it. But this is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a descriptive overview of your project, its goals, its objectives, its constraints, you know, maybe a page or two to explain what it's all about. Don't forget, I know nothing about your project yet, and I'm going to wait to see and read what all these things are going to be like. Staffing, your team organisation, your team skills, the named individuals, responsibilities, don't skip on that. Put those nice spider diagrams down. Make sure that they're put in there, every individual, to justify your choice. Specification of your deliverables. What is it you're going to produce precisely? Let's have that specification down. The process model, sometimes called the methodology. Which methodologies are you going to use? You only need two methodologies. You need your software development and you need your project methodology. And they need to fit together. Agile with agile, linear with linear. Schedule, including key dates and milestones, so your Gantt chart, and maybe the work breakdown structure as well. And I would expect quite a lot of items on there. If you can give me a Gantt chart that looks like the one I showed you, out of 10 I might give that 1, 2. But give me a detailed one which covers your project and you'll get a good mark for it. The monitoring scheme, well, we've had a look at how you monitor things. The risk plan with contingencies and mitigations, so all those things about what would I do to stop it from happening, what should I do if it actually happens. Don't forget, arrange it in order. Good. And then finally, your quality plan. Other project plans might include these other things too, resources required, budgets with cost breakdown, contractual issues, but they won't affect you. The bits in blue are not your concern. But in another project, later on in the future, maybe those ones will. So, we have been concentrating today on this one. And that actually come pretty well to the end. I just have one final thing to say to you, which will bring us back to where we started from, about quality in general, quality as a whole, quality about every aspect of life, really. Here's a quotation for you. Be interesting to know what you think of this. I have offended God and mankind because my work didn't reach the quality it should have. Any guess who that might be? Any guess?
My insecurities.
Who?
Someone's insecurities.
No. I've offended God and mankind. Takes you back a few years, maybe. Maybe some people wouldn't speak in this kind of language today. Anybody else who you think? No guesses at all. No random.
Da Vinci.
Who's looked it up? Absolutely right, sir. Leonardo da Vinci said that. You think of what he did. You think of the Mona Lisa as one thing, but think of all those amazing plans that he produced. Think of the Last Supper and all that kind of stuff, which are world-renowned for their exquisite quality. And this guy says, I've offended God. Apparently this is the last words he said just before he died. I've offended God and mankind because my work didn't reach the quality it should have. Well, what we can say is that the quality that he produced well exceeds anything that normal human beings produce. And yet, what that says about him is something very important, it seems to me. What it says about him is that his standards of excellence were set so high that even he claimed that he couldn't reach them. And you know what? If you want a secret about how to bring excellence to play in your own life, the secret is that. The secret's there with Leonardo. It's setting your standards incredibly high and then aiming for them as best you can. Otherwise, you will never reach the excellence. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Jordan Peterson, but I was listening to one of his talks. And I'm going to end with this because he was talking about a particular story. In fact, he was talking about a book that a guy was reading. He said that, let me get this right, a young man came to me, he said, and he told me that his life was lacking purpose and meaning and direction. Okay? Until, he said, one day he picked up a book. And the book was, can you guess? Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And he said when he read that book, it's like, it opened up a whole new vista for him and his life. John Peterson said that he's also read the book 3 times. And it's the one thing that's interesting about the book, he said, is that it's the examination of the whole idea of quality. And it inspires people. I think it inspired me when I read it too. And that what it inspires you with is that it inspires you with the truth that there are qualitative differences of things in life. In other words, there are things which are good, and there are things which are poor and bad, and there are things which are excellent, and there are things which are rubbish. And it inspires you to try to make that distinction between the two and make it work. And, to say that this thing here is better than that thing there is an important concept to hold on to. I know in this kind of environment these days, we often don't want to do that because we might upset people if we say that, that's not so good and this is good. And it might offend some people, but, you can't put aside the desire for what is good and right at the expense even of equality, says Jordan Peterson. And it's an important truth to hold on to. He said that the modern idea, and I'm really quoting him, was that the modern idea is that you should be content with yourself as you are. How did he put it? That you you have to accept yourself. And Jordan Peterson, in his quite emotional way, said, I think that is an utterly insane idea, that you should just accept yourself as you are. And there's nothing more destructive than that, he said. It's the same with projects too, that we're okay as we are. The idea that you are not okay as you are, sorry, no. And the reason for that is because you can be way more than you can actually be at the moment. You can do far more than that. And, you know, what is there better than striving to be better than that? And the young guy from the Zen and the Automotive Cycle Maintenance said that the book had a real impact upon him, because he said it was, he wasn't happy with his current mode of living, with his current way of life, and he didn't consider his life sufficient in that kind of way. And Robert Piercy, in the book, lays out the notion that you can make distinctions between the good and the bad, between the better and the worse. And then as you start to do that, then you can start to identify the things which are not so good in your life and just dispense with them, just get rid of them, leaving the good behind and then striving on further for even higher excellence. That's what you've got to do, really, if you're going to do a good project. And that really is what things about. We are insufficient of ourselves, says Peterson, and we need to strive for the highest good, because if you do that, not only does it get you a sense of real satisfaction, but it provides purpose in your life too, and it will provide purpose for your project. If you come away from your project thinking, wow, I've done the very best that I can do, I've scored a fantastic score, I got 80 or 90% in my project because I put a lot of work in and I did a really good job, that provides a sense of purpose and meaning for what you do. And I think all of us need that kind of thing. Certainly projects need that. Not just the marks that you have, that you get, but personal satisfaction of doing something well. And we can all strive for that. And that, after all, is what excellence is about. And that is what quality is about. Thank you very much.